The rain came down like someone had turned on a giant faucet in the sky. David held his daughter's hand tight as they ran under the awning of a tall glass building. His shoes were soaked through, making that awful squishy sound with every step. 7-year-old Sophie was shivering, her pink jacket doing absolutely nothing against the downpour that had caught them off guard. "Daddy, I'm cold," Sophie said, her teeth chattering. Her backpack, stuffed with library books she'd insisted on returning today of all days, hung heavy on her small shoulders. David pulled her close, trying to shield her with his body. He checked his phone. The battery was at 3%. Great. Just great. The bus they needed had left 10 minutes ago, and the next one wouldn't come for another 45 minutes. He had exactly $2.30 in his pocket. Not enough for a taxi. Not even close. This morning had started with such hope. He'd put on his only good shirt, the one without any stains, and gone to a job interview at a marketing firm downtown. Sophie had given him a thumbs up before school, saying he'd definitely get it, but the interview had gone badly. Really badly. They'd looked at his resume with those polite faces that really meant, thanks but no thanks. The gap in his work history was just too big to explain away. 2 years of being a full-time dad to Sophie didn't look great on paper, apparently. "We'll wait here until the rain stops a bit," David said, trying to sound cheerful. "Then we'll make a run for it, okay?" Sophie nodded, but he could see her lips turning a bit blue. His heart twisted. Some father he was. Couldn't even keep his kid dry. Inside the building, Rebecca Hayes was wrapping up the worst board meeting of her career. As CEO of Tech Vision Industries, she was used to tough conversations. But today had been brutal. The board wanted cuts, big cuts. They were talking about laying off hundreds of people, and she had 2 weeks to decide who stayed and who went. She walked toward the exit, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Her assistant rushed to keep up, talking about dinner reservations at some fancy restaurant Rebecca couldn't care less about right now. "The car is waiting." "Ms. Hayes," her assistant said, holding out an umbrella. Rebecca stopped at the glass doors, watching the rain hammer down. That's when she saw them. A man and a little girl huddled together under the awning to her right, both soaking wet. The little girl was shivering so hard Rebecca could see it from inside. The girl's backpack had a unicorn keychain that sparkled even in the gray light, and something about that detail hit Rebecca right in the chest. Her own daughter had a unicorn phase once. Before the divorce. Before Rebecca had chosen board meetings over ballet recitals one too many times. "Ms. Hayes," her assistant prompted, "your reservation is at 7. Rebecca made a decision that surprised even herself. "Cancel it," she said, taking the umbrella. "I'll take myself home tonight." She pushed through the doors and walked straight to the man and little girl. Up close, she could see the man was maybe in his early 30s, with tired eyes and wet hair plastered to his forehead. His jacket was thin, probably cheap, and his daughter's shoes had holes in them. "Excuse me," Rebecca said. "You two look like you could use a ride." The man looked startled. He straightened up, and Rebecca saw pride flash across his face. The kind of pride people have when they're struggling but don't want anyone to know. "We're fine, thank you," he said, just waiting for the rain to ease up. "Daddy, I'm really cold," Sophie whispered, and that seemed to break something in him. Rebecca held out the umbrella. "Please, my car is right there. It's not safe for her to be out in this weather." "Where do you need to go?" The man hesitated for a long moment. Rebecca could see him wrestling with it, wanting to refuse but knowing his daughter needed help. "Maple Street," he finally said quietly. "The apartment's near Riverside Park." "That's on my way," Rebecca lied smoothly. It wasn't anywhere near her penthouse downtown, but what did that matter? "Come on." She led them to her car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than the man made in a year. David tried not to stare as the driver opened the door. Sophie climbed in first, her eyes wide. "Wow, it's so warm," Sophie said, holding her hands up to the heating vents. Rebecca slid in beside them and the driver pulled into traffic. For a moment, nobody spoke. David sat stiffly, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm Rebecca, by the way," she said, keeping her voice friendly. She deliberately left off her last name. No need to make this more awkward than it already was. "David. And this is Sophie." "Hi," Sophie said shyly. Then, because kids don't understand awkward silences, she added, "We were at the library. I got 3 new books about horses." "Do you like horses?" Rebecca smiled. "I used to when I was your age." My daddy draws horses really good, Sophie continued, warming up. He draws everything good. He made all my birthday cards and he makes logos for people on the computer. Sophie, David said, a warning in his voice. He clearly didn't want his daughter advertising his unemployment, but Rebecca's interest was genuine. You're a graphic designer? David nodded reluctantly. Freelance mostly. I do what I can between... He glanced at Sophie. Between other responsibilities. Rebecca understood what he wasn't saying. Single parent? Probably no childcare. Jobs that had to fit around school hours and sick days and parent-teacher conferences. That must be challenging, she said carefully. We manage, David said. And there was that pride again. Sophie's worth it. Sophie beamed up at her father, and Rebecca felt that twist in her chest again. When was the last time her own daughter looked at her like that? Christmas, maybe? Or had it been Thanksgiving? The drive to Maple Street took 20 minutes. David pointed out a rundown apartment building with peeling paint and a flickering streetlight. Rebecca's driver pulled up to the curb. This is us, David said. Thank you, really, you didn't have to do this. Yes, she did, Sophie said. You're really nice, Rebecca. Rebecca found herself smiling. You're welcome, Sophie. She pulled out a business card, then hesitated. Her business card had her title on it. Instead, she grabbed a pen from her purse and wrote her personal number on the back of a receipt. Look, she said, handing it to David. I know some people in the design industry. If you're looking for work, give me a call. I might be able to connect you with someone. David took the paper like it might bite him. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just call if you need to. Rebecca watched as they climbed out of the car. Sophie waved enthusiastically as they headed into the building. As the driver pulled away, Rebecca's assistant would have been shocked if she'd seen the expression on her boss's face. Rebecca Hayes, the Iron Lady of Tech Vision, was crying. Just a little. Just enough. She wiped her eyes and pulled out her phone. She had work to do. But for the first time in years, it felt like work that actually mattered. That night, David stood in their small apartment, drying Sophie's hair with a towel. She was chattering about the nice lady with the fancy car who liked horses. Maybe she'll be your friend, Daddy, Sophie said hopefully. David smiled sadly. Maybe, sweetheart. But people like that don't usually stay friends with people like us. He had no idea how wrong he was. And he definitely had no idea that Rebecca was about to change his entire life. David couldn't stop thinking about Rebecca. Not in a romantic way, nothing like that. Just this persistent gratitude that felt too big for his chest. She'd helped them when she didn't have to, and he had no way to thank her properly. The piece of paper with her number sat on his kitchen counter for 2 days before he worked up the courage to send a text. This is David from the rain. Thank you again for your kindness. Sophie hasn't stopped talking about you. He hit send before he could overthink it. 3 hours later, his phone buzzed. I'm glad I could help. How is Sophie feeling? No cold, I hope? David smiled. She'd remembered his daughter's name. That small detail felt important somehow. She's perfect. Completely fine. I'm the one who got sick, of course. Dad life, came the reply with a smiling emoji. Then another message. I meant what I said about connections. Can you send me your portfolio? David's hands actually shook as he typed back. He sent her a link to his website, such as it was. A collection of logos he'd made for small businesses, some birthday invitations, a few restaurant menus. Nothing fancy, nothing that would impress someone who drove a car like that. That night, Rebecca sat in her penthouse apartment alone as usual, scrolling through David's work on her laptop. She'd ordered takeout again because cooking for one seemed pointless. Her ex-husband had their daughter this week, so the place felt extra empty. David's designs were good. Really good, actually. Raw but creative. He had an eye for color and a way of making simple things feel warm and human. The kind of work her company's marketing team would kill for, if they'd just looked past the lack of fancy agency experience. She picked up her phone and called Janet, her HR director. Janet answered on the second ring, probably expecting bad news about the layoffs. Janet, I need you to do something for me, Rebecca said, and I need you to keep it quiet, okay? Janet sounded cautious. What's going on? There's a graphic designer I want you to contact about a position. His name is David Torres. I'm sending you his information. Is this someone you know personally? Rebecca hesitated. I met him briefly. But I'm not doing this as a favor. His work is legitimately good. I want you to interview him properly. Put him through the normal process. Don't mention my name at all. If he asks how you found him, just say you were looking through online portfolios. Rebecca, you know I have to ask. Is this going to be a problem? HR nightmare kind of problem? No, Rebecca said firmly. Nothing like that. I just think he deserves a fair shot, and if I contact him directly, it won't feel earned. Does that make sense? Janet was quiet for a moment. Actually, yeah, it does. Okay, I'll reach out tomorrow. Thank you. Rebecca hung up and immediately felt guilty. Was this the right thing to do? Or was she just being selfish, trying to feel like a good person by playing fairy godmother? She pushed the thought away. David's work was solid. If he bombed the interview, that would be on him. She was just opening a door. What he did with it was his choice. The next morning, David was making Sophie breakfast when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, thinking it was spam, but something made him pick up. Hello, is this David Torres? A woman's voice, professional and brisk. Yes? This is Janet Chen from Tech Vision Industries. We're looking for a graphic designer for our marketing department, and we came across your portfolio online. Would you be interested in coming in for an interview? David nearly dropped the phone. Tech Vision Industries. That was the massive tech company downtown. The one with the building that looked like it belonged in Dubai. The one that had turned him down for an entry-level position last year. Yes. Absolutely. When? Would Thursday at 10 work for you? Thursday, that was 3 days away. Sophie had school, he could make it work. Thursday is perfect. After he hung up, David just stood there in his tiny kitchen, staring at nothing. Sophie tugged on his shirt. Daddy, the toast is burning. He jumped, rushing to the toaster. As he scraped off the burnt parts, his mind was racing. Tech Vision. How had they found him? His website barely got any traffic. Unless Rebecca. It had to be. She'd said she knew people. She must have a friend at Tech Vision who owed her a favor. David felt a mix of emotions. Gratitude, yes, but also embarrassment. He didn't want to be a charity case. But then again, if they were actually interviewing him, that meant something, right? They wouldn't waste time if Rebecca had just asked them to do her a favor and hire him. They'd want to see if he was actually good enough. He spent the next 3 days preparing like his life depended on it, because it kind of did. He updated his portfolio, adding 3 new mock projects he created specifically for Tech Vision's brand style. He researched the company until he could recite their mission statement in his sleep. He even bought a new shirt, spending money he really shouldn't have, because showing up in his old stained one wasn't an option. Thursday morning arrived. David dropped Sophie at school early, giving her an extra long hug. You've got this, Daddy, she said seriously. Just be yourself. When did you get so wise? He asked, kissing her forehead. I'm 7 3/4 now, she said, like that explained everything. The Tech Vision building was even more intimidating up close, all glass and steel, with a lobby that looked like an art museum. David felt completely out of place in his department store shirt and his second-hand shoes that he'd polished, until they almost looked new. Janet met him in the lobby. She was friendly, putting him at ease as they rode the elevator to the 15th floor. The interview lasted 2 hours. They asked him to redesign their employee newsletter, critique some existing marketing materials, and explain his design philosophy. David forgot to be nervous. This was what he loved, what he was actually good at. He talked about making design accessible, about how good visuals could make people feel included instead of alienated. He showed them his portfolio, including the work he'd done for a local food bank that couldn't pay him but needed help desperately. Janet and the marketing director exchanged glances he couldn't read. When it was over, Janet walked him back to the elevator. We'll be in touch soon, she said. Really soon. David wanted to ask if Rebecca had put them up to this, but he couldn't figure out how to phrase it without sounding paranoid or ungrateful. So he just thanked her and left. He picked up Sophie from school that afternoon, still buzzing with nervous energy. How'd it go? She asked immediately. I think it went well, he said, but I don't know for sure. That evening, David tried to text Rebecca to thank her, assuming she'd pulled strings. But he wrote and deleted the message 5 times, never finding the right words. What if he was wrong? What if she'd had nothing to do with it and he came across as presumptuous? Better to wait and see. He didn't have to wait long. Janet called Friday afternoon. David? We'd like to offer you the position. Can you start Monday? David's knees actually went weak. Yes, absolutely yes. After the logistics were discussed and he hung up, David sank onto his couch. Sophie came running from her room where she'd been doing homework. Did you get it? I got it. Sophie squealed and jumped on him, hugging him so tight it hurt. David held his daughter and let himself cry a little. Happy tears this time. For the first time in 2 years, he felt like maybe things were going to be okay. Monday morning came too fast and not fast enough. David's new employee badge felt heavy in his pocket as he rode the elevator to the 15th floor. The marketing department welcomed him warmly, setting him up at a desk with 2 monitors and software he'd only dreamed of using. His supervisor, a guy named Tom, was easygoing and patient, walking him through current projects and expectations. Everyone seemed normal, friendly. Nobody treated him like a charity case. By lunchtime, David was starting to believe he'd actually earned this on his own merit. What he didn't know was that 30 floors above him, Rebecca was watching his name on her employee directory, feeling satisfied. Janet had assured her that David had aced the interview, that the marketing team had been genuinely impressed. He'd earned the job fair and square. She wanted to text him congratulations but stopped herself. Better to let him settle in first. Better to let him feel like this was his victory, not hers. But in the cafeteria that first week, she saw him. David was sitting alone eating a sandwich he'd brought from home, reviewing something on his laptop. He looked focused, happy, like he belonged there. Rebecca bought her salad and deliberately sat 3 tables away, where she could see him without being obvious. Watching him made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose maybe, or hope. The idea that helping people could still mean something in a world that often felt cold and transactional. David never looked up, never saw her. And that was fine. Better than fine, actually. She'd done something good without needing credit for it. That felt right. But Rebecca didn't know that in a few months the universe was going to force them back together in a way neither of them expected, and when it did, everything would change. 3 months passed like a dream David was afraid to wake up from. Every morning he'd drop Sophie at school, catch the bus downtown, and walk into Tech Vision like he owned the place. Well, not exactly like that. More like he belonged there, which was almost as good. His designs were everywhere now. The new employee newsletter he'd created got praise company-wide. Tom had him working on the upcoming product launch campaign, which was apparently a huge deal. Other designers asked for his input. People knew his name in the hallways. The best part? David could finally breathe. For the first time since his ex-wife left, money wasn't a daily panic attack. He'd moved Sophie and himself to a better apartment, one where the heating actually worked and the neighbors didn't fight at 3 a.m. Sophie had new shoes without holes. They could order pizza on Fridays without him calculating if they'd have enough for groceries. "Daddy, can I get the art set?" Sophie had asked last week at the store, pointing to a $40 collection of markers and colored pencils. And David had said yes. Just yes. No mental math, no guilt, no, maybe next month. Sophie had hugged the box the whole way home like it was made of gold. But David couldn't shake one thing. He still hadn't seen Rebecca, not once. He'd looked for her, casually at first, then more deliberately. He'd asked around about a Rebecca who worked at the company. But in a building with 2,000 employees, the name meant nothing. Nobody connected it to anyone specific. He'd texted her number once, 2 months in, just to say thank you. The message had gone through, but she never replied. Maybe she'd changed her number. Maybe she'd forgotten about him entirely. That stung more than he wanted to admit. What David didn't know was that Rebecca saw him all the time. In the cafeteria, usually, where she'd grab coffee and deliberately sit where she could watch him without being obvious. She saw him laughing with his team, saw him leaving at exactly 5:30 every day, always rushing to get Sophie, saw him becoming the person he was meant to be. She'd gotten his text, read it 100 times. Never replied because what would she say? "You're welcome. Also, I'm actually your CEO and I've been secretly watching you succeed." That would be weird, really weird. Besides, Rebecca had bigger problems. The board was getting aggressive about those layoffs. They wanted names by the end of the month. 500 people, they said. Cut the fat. Improve the bottom line. All those corporate phrases that really meant destroying lives. Rebecca had been fighting them for weeks, but she was losing. The economy had taken a downturn. Shareholders were nervous. The board had the power to override her if she didn't comply. She was staring at spreadsheets in her office when Janet knocked. "You look like you haven't slept," Janet said, setting down coffee. "That's because I haven't," Rebecca muttered. "They're pushing for recent hires to be cut first. Easiest targets, they said. That would include David." Rebecca's head snapped up. She'd been so busy trying to save everyone that she hadn't thought about him specifically. But Janet was right. 3 months was nothing in corporate time. He'd be near the top of any last hired, first fired list. "We can't," Rebecca said. "His work is too good, I agree. But you know how this works. They'll look at seniority, not quality, unless what?" Janet leaned against the desk. "What if we make it so they have to look at quality? A competition. Best campaign wins. Winners are safe from cuts, losers are on the table." Rebecca sat back thinking. It was risky. If David's team lost, she'd be the one who put a target on his back. But if they won, it would be undeniable. Merit-based. No one could claim favoritism or say she'd protected him for personal reasons. "Set it up," Rebecca said. "Company-wide competition. 3 weeks to develop a campaign for the new product launch. Present to the executive team. Winning team gets bonuses and job security." "You're gambling on him," Janet said quietly. "I'm gambling on talent," Rebecca corrected. "If he's as good as I think he is, he'll win on his own." Janet left and Rebecca pulled up David's personnel file. His performance reviews were outstanding. His designs had measurably improved engagement metrics. On paper, he was exactly the kind of employee they should be fighting to keep. But paper didn't matter to the board. Only results did. The announcement went out the next day. The entire company buzzed with nervous energy. Everyone knew what this really was. A way to decide who stayed and who got cut without directly saying so. David read the email 3 times, his stomach sinking. A competition. His job security, everyone's job security, riding on a single presentation. Tom called an emergency team meeting. "All right, people," Tom said, trying to sound upbeat. "This is our chance to shine. David, you're our star designer. We need your best work." David felt the weight of every eye in the room. These were good people. They had families, kids, mortgages, and now their jobs depended on him not screwing up. "I won't let you down," he said, hoping it was true. That night, David barely slept. He sketched ideas until his hand cramped, drank coffee until he felt jittery, and thought about Sophie. About the new apartment they'd just signed a lease on. About the art supplies she loved. About going back to scrambling for freelance work and stretching dollars until they screamed. He couldn't fail. He wouldn't. The campaign came to him at 4 a.m. when he was half delirious from exhaustion. The new product was a cloud storage system, boring on the surface. But what if they positioned it differently? What if it wasn't about storage but about shelter, about keeping precious things safe when life got stormy? David thought about that rainy night, about Rebecca holding an umbrella over him and Sophie, about having a safe place when everything felt unstable. He called the campaign "Your Shelter in the Storm." The tagline was simple. When life is unpredictable, keep what matters safe. His team loved it. They worked around the clock, building presentations, designing mock-ups, crafting every detail. David poured everything into it. All his fear, all his hope, all his desperation to protect the life he'd built for Sophie. 3 weeks flew by. Presentation day arrived like an execution date. The entire company crammed into the main auditorium. David had never been more nervous in his life. Tom squeezed his shoulder. "You've got this." But David wasn't so sure. There were 5 teams presenting, and they were going last. He watched the other presentations from backstage, each one more polished than he'd expected. His confidence started cracking. Then he saw the executive panel filing in to sit in the front row. The CEO would be there, everyone said. The actual CEO, who hardly anyone ever saw. David peeked through the curtain to see who that was. And his entire world tilted sideways. Rebecca. The woman from the rain, the one with the kind smile and the fancy car, was walking to the center seat marked CEO Rebecca Hayes. David couldn't breathe. His Rebecca was the CEO of TechVision, the CEO who'd probably pulled strings to get him hired, the CEO who'd been there all along, 30 floors above him, and he'd never known. "David?" Tom was shaking his shoulder. "We're up. You ready?" No, he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready at all, but he walked on stage anyway because what choice did he have? The lights were blinding. He found Rebecca in the crowd and their eyes met. He saw recognition flash across her face, saw something like panic, then something like regret. His carefully rehearsed opening stuck in his throat. Was any of this real? Had he earned anything, or was he just a charity case she'd installed in her company like a pet project? "David?" Tom whispered urgently. "Start the presentation." David started talking, but his voice sounded wrong, mechanical. He went through the slides on autopilot, but his mind was somewhere else entirely, in a car on a rainy night, in his apartment texting a number that never responded. In every moment over the past 3 months when he'd felt proud of himself, felt like he'd finally succeeded on his own merit. Had any of it been real? He stumbled through the presentation, missing cues, forgetting key points. Tom tried to cover for him, but the damage was done. David could see it in the executives' faces. Confusion, disappointment. The same look he'd seen at that failed interview 3 months ago. When they finished, the applause was polite but sparse. David walked off stage feeling numb. "What happened to you out there?" Tom asked, concerned. "You were brilliant in rehearsals," David couldn't explain. How could he? How could he say that the CEO was a woman he'd met once, who'd driven him home in the rain, who'd apparently decided his entire career trajectory on a whim? The other teams presented. The judges deliberated. David sat in the back row, barely listening. Finally, the results. Tom's team won. David's work, despite his terrible presentation, had been strong enough to carry them through. The executives had voted based on the campaign itself, not his stumbling delivery. His team cheered. People hugged him. Tom was ecstatic. They were safe. They'd won. But David felt nothing except a hollow ache in his chest. He waited until everyone else left, then made his way to the 30th floor. He'd never been up there before. The executive level was all glass and expensive art and the kind of quiet that money bought. Rebecca's office was at the end of the hall. Her assistant tried to stop him, but Rebecca must have been expecting him because she stepped out. "Let him through," she said quietly. David walked into her office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that probably cost more than his car, and Rebecca Saint. David's phone was already in his hand before Janet finished speaking. 3 missed calls from Sophie's school. His hands shook so badly he could barely unlock the screen. "What happened?" He managed to get out. "Is she okay?" Janet looked between him and Rebecca. "The school nurse said she fell during recess. Hit her head. They've called an ambulance." David's vision went spotty. Sophie. His Sophie. He stumbled toward the door, not thinking about where he was going, just knowing he needed to get to her now. "David, wait." Rebecca grabbed her purse and keys. "My car is faster. Let me drive you." He wanted to refuse, wanted to tell her to stay away from him and his daughter. But Sophie was hurt, and Rebecca's car really was faster than any bus or taxi he could find. "Fine," he choked out. They ran to the elevator together. Rebecca's driver was already waiting when they burst through the lobby doors. David barely remembered getting into the car. Rebecca was giving the driver directions to Children's Hospital, her voice calm and clear even though David could see her hands were shaking too. "She's going to be okay," Rebecca said, and it sounded like she was trying to convince herself as much as him. Kids are resilient. Head injuries always look worse than they are. David couldn't speak. His mind kept playing horrible scenarios. Sophie lying on the playground. Sophie scared and calling for him. Sophie alone in an ambulance with strangers. What kind of father was he? He'd been so focused on his stupid job and his stupid pride that he hadn't been there when she needed him. The drive took 15 minutes that felt like 15 hours. David was out of the car before it fully stopped, running through the emergency room doors. A nurse directed him to room 7. Sophie was sitting on a hospital bed looking tiny and scared. There was a bandage on her forehead and her eyes were red from crying. But she was alive. She was okay. "Daddy!" She reached for him and David grabbed her, holding her so tight she squeaked. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. Are you okay? Does it hurt?" "It hurts a little," Sophie said, her voice small. "I fell off the monkey bars. I'm sorry, Daddy." "You don't apologize for getting hurt," David said fiercely, kissing her forehead around the bandage. "Never apologize for that." A doctor came in, a young woman with kind eyes. She explained that Sophie had a mild concussion. No fracture, no bleeding. but she needed to be monitored for the next 24 hours. They'd keep her overnight just to be safe. David felt his knees go weak with relief. Mild concussion. She'd be okay. His little girl would be okay. Can I stay with her? He asked. Of course. We'll set up a cot in the room. It was only then that David remembered Rebecca. She was standing in the doorway, her expensive suit looking out of place in the cheerful pediatric ward. Sophie's eyes lit up. Rebecca, Sophie said. You came too? Rebecca stepped into the room hesitantly. Hi, sweetheart. I heard you had a scary fall. I was trying to do the monkey bars like the big kids, Sophie explained. But I slipped. That was very brave of you to try, Rebecca said softly. How are you feeling? My head hurts. But Daddy's here now, so it's better. David watched them interact and something in his chest twisted. Sophie remembered Rebecca after all this time. She'd talked about her for weeks after that rainy night, asking if they'd see the nice lady again. The doctor left to handle paperwork. Sophie started asking Rebecca about her car, her shoes, her job, the way kids do when they're trying to avoid thinking about scary things. Rebecca sat in the visitor's chair and answered every question patiently. She asked Sophie about school, about her favorite subjects, about the art set David had bought her. She was good with kids, natural. It made David wonder about her own life, her own family. After a while, Sophie's eyes started drooping. The day's excitement was catching up with her. You should sleep, sweetheart, David said gently. Will you both stay? Sophie asked, her eyes moving between David and Rebecca. I'll be right here all night, David promised. Rebecca too? Rebecca glanced at David, uncertain. He should tell her to leave. He was still angry, still hurt, still confused about everything. But Sophie's hopeful face stopped him. For a little while, Rebecca said, until you fall asleep. Sophie smiled and snuggled into her pillow. David held her hand while Rebecca sat quietly in the corner. Within 10 minutes, Sophie was out cold, her breathing deep and even. The room fell silent except for the beeping monitors. David should ask Rebecca to leave now. He should finish the confrontation they'd started in her office. But suddenly he was too tired for anger, too drained for pride. I'm sorry, Rebecca said quietly. About everything. About how you found out. David stared at Sophie's sleeping face. Was it all a lie? Did you just feel sorry for me? No. Rebecca's voice was firm. That's not what happened. Yes, I called HR about you. Yes, I asked them to reach out. But I also told them not to mention my name. I told them to interview you properly, to hire you only if you were actually good enough. And you were. Are. Your work speaks for itself. But I never would have gotten the interview without you. Maybe not, Rebecca admitted. But lots of talented people don't get interviews because they don't have connections. That doesn't mean they don't deserve the job when they get it. David wanted to argue, but he was too tired. And maybe she had a point, maybe. Why did you help us? He asked. Really? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Do you have any other kids? She finally asked. No, just Sophie. Her mom left when she was 5. Said she wasn't cut out for motherhood. The words still hurt to say. I have a daughter, Rebecca said. Lily, she's 9. My ex-husband has primary custody because I worked too much, traveled too much, missed too many school events. I built a company and lost my family in the process. David looked at her, really looked at her. The expensive suit couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. When I saw you and Sophie that night, Rebecca continued, the way you held her, the way you'd do anything for her even though you were struggling, it reminded me of what I threw away. And I wanted to help because maybe if I helped you, it would balance out the scales somehow, make up for all the times I wasn't there for Lily. That's not how it works, David said, but his voice was gentler now. I know, but I did it anyway. And yes, maybe it was selfish. Maybe I was trying to feel like a good person. But your work was genuinely excellent, David. The marketing team loves you. Tom says you're the best designer he's worked with in years. You won that competition today even though you bombed the presentation because the work itself was that strong. David thought about his campaign, about Shelter in the Storm. He'd meant it for the product, but maybe it was really about something else. About finding safety when everything felt uncertain. About people who showed up with umbrellas when you needed them most. I'm still mad at you, he said. I know, and I don't know if I can trust that anything I achieve is actually mine. That's fair, but thank you for driving me here, for checking on Sophie, Rebecca nodded. She's a special kid. You're doing a great job with her. They sat in silence for a while. A nurse came in to check Sophie's vitals. Everything was stable, good, normal. I should probably go, Rebecca said eventually. Let you rest. Yeah, David agreed. But then, surprising himself, he added, Rebecca, that night in the rain, that was real, right? You helping us? That wasn't about business or guilt or whatever. That was just one person helping another? Rebecca met his eyes. That was the most real thing I've done in years. Okay, David said. That's something, at least. Rebecca stood up, gathering her things. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, I never replied to your text because I didn't know what to say. How do you tell someone you've been lying by omission for 3 months? How do you explain that you've been watching them succeed and being proud of them from a distance like some kind of weird fairy godmother? Despite everything, David almost smiled. You could have started with hi. Hi, Rebecca said. And goodbye for now. Take care of Sophie. Take care of yourself. She left, and David was alone with his sleeping daughter and his complicated thoughts. He stayed awake all night, watching Sophie breathe, thinking about everything that had happened. The rain, the job, the competition, the woman with too much power and not enough family, trying to fix her own brokenness by fixing his. It was messy. Nothing about it was clean or simple or the way things were supposed to work, but Sophie was safe. He had a job that he was apparently good at, even if the way he got it was complicated. And maybe, possibly, he'd made a connection with someone who understood what it was like to be broken and trying. When morning came and Sophie woke up asking for pancakes, David smiled. They'd figure it out. Somehow they always did. What he didn't know yet was that the board had watched that competition carefully. They'd seen his work, and they'd made a decision that would change everything again. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, David just held his daughter's hand and was grateful she was okay. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. Sophie got discharged the next afternoon with instructions to take it easy for a week. No monkey bars. No roughhousing. Lots of rest. She was disappointed about missing school but perked up when David promised they could watch movies and eat ice cream all weekend. David took the week off to stay with her. Tom had insisted, saying family came first and that David had earned the time off anyway. The layoffs were happening the following week, but their team was safe. They'd won. They'd survived, but David couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. He and Rebecca had called some kind of truce in the hospital, but it felt temporary, fragile, like neither of them really knew what they were to each other now. He texted her on Saturday. Just a simple update. Sophie's doing great. Thanks again for everything. This time, she replied within minutes. I'm so glad. Give her my best. Then, after a pause, can we talk? Not about work. About everything else. David stared at the message. He could say no. Should say no, probably. Keep things professional. Don't complicate his job more than it already was. But he typed back, coffee? Monday morning before work? Perfect. I know a place. Monday came. David dropped Sophie at school with extra kisses and arrived at the coffee shop Rebecca had suggested. It was small, tucked away from the business district, the kind of place where nobody would recognize a CEO having coffee with an employee. Rebecca was already there, looking different somehow. It took David a moment to realize she wasn't wearing a suit, just jeans and a sweater. Her hair was down. She looked younger, more like the woman who'd driven them home in the rain. Hi, she said as he sat down. Hi, David echoed. The barista brought over 2 coffees, and David realized Rebecca had already ordered for him. Black, 2 sugars. The way he'd made it in the car that rainy night when she'd asked if he wanted to stop for coffee. She'd remembered. They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Then Rebecca spoke. I need to tell you the whole truth, she said. Not because I owe it to you as your boss, but because I owe it to you as whatever we are. People who met in the rain, I guess. David nodded, listening. I didn't just help you because you reminded me of my failures as a mother, Rebecca said. I mean, that was part of it. But it was also because I saw something in you that I used to have and lost. This determination to keep going even when everything was falling apart. This refusal to give up on the people you love. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. I built Tech Vision from nothing. Started in my garage 20 years ago, and somewhere along the way, I forgot why I started it. It was supposed to create opportunities for people. Instead, it became this machine that ate up my life and spit out quarterly reports. What changed? David asked. You did. Seeing you with Sophie, seeing how you prioritized her even when you were struggling, it reminded me what actually matters. And then watching you work these past months, seeing you succeed, it felt like maybe I'd done something right for once. Like maybe I'd helped someone instead of just using them. David took a sip of his coffee. You know what the worst part was? Finding out you were the CEO? What? It wasn't that you'd helped me get the job. It was that I'd spent 3 months wishing I could find you to say thank you. I'd look for you in the cafeteria, ask people if they knew a Rebecca, send texts that never got answered. And you were there the whole time, 30 floors up, and I never knew. Rebecca's eyes got shiny. I'm sorry. I wanted to reach out so many times, but I didn't know how to without making it weird, without making you feel like I was checking up on my investment or something. Were you? Maybe at first, Rebecca admitted. But then I saw you were actually thriving, and it stopped being about me feeling better and started being about just wanting you to be okay. Does that make sense? Yeah, David said. Actually, it does. They drank their coffee. Outside, the city was waking up. People rushing to work, living their lives, completely unaware of the complicated conversation happening in this little coffee shop. The board wants to promote you, Rebecca said suddenly. David nearly choked on his coffee. What? Your campaign was that good. They want you as senior designer. It's a real position, real promotion. Tom recommended you himself before he even knew the board was considering it. I had nothing to do with it except trying to stay out of the way. I don't know what to say. Say you'll take it. Say you'll accept that maybe you're actually just talented and deserving, and not everything good that happens to you is charity or luck. David looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who had everything and nothing, who'd built an empire but lost her family, who'd stopped in the rain for strangers because somewhere deep down she still remembered what it was like to need help. Okay, he said, I'll take it. On one condition. What? You stop hiding from me. If we're going to work in the same building, let's at least acknowledge we know each other. No more watching from 30 floors up. Rebecca smiled, really smiled, for the first time since they'd sat down. Deal. But that means you have to stop thinking of me as some kind of mysterious benefactor. I'm just a person who made some questionable decisions and is trying to do better. Also deal. They shook hands and it felt like something shifting. Not quite friendship, not quite anything definable, but something real. Can I ask you something? David said. Your daughter Lily, do you see her much? Rebecca's smile faded. Every other weekend. Some holidays, not enough. Her father remarried someone who's better at the parent thing than I ever was. You could be better at it. It's too late. The damage is done. Sophie's mom left when she was 5, David said. Just walked out one day. For 2 years, Sophie had nightmares about it. She'd wake up crying, asking what she did wrong, why mommy didn't love her anymore. Rebecca looked stricken. David, I'm sorry, but she's okay now. Kids are resilient, and it's never too late to show up. Even if you can't fix the past, you can be there for the future. That's what I tell myself when I mess up with Sophie, which is often, you're a good father. I'm a trying father. That's all any of us can be. They finished their coffee. Rebecca paid, ignoring David's protests. You can get it next time, she said. And the casual assumption that there would be a next time felt significant. David accepted the promotion. The raise meant he could put Sophie in art classes, the kind taught by real artists, not just after-school programs. Sophie was thrilled, showing him her drawings every day, each one better than the last. Rebecca started having lunch in the cafeteria sometimes, sitting with different departments, trying to remember what it was like to be connected to the people who actually made her company work. Sometimes she'd sit near David's table. They'd wave. Once or twice they'd chat about nothing important. Work stuff, weather, how Sophie was doing. It was normal, almost boring. And somehow that felt revolutionary. 3 months after the hospital incident, David found himself with an unexpected problem. Sophie's school was having a father-daughter dance, and Sophie was over the moon excited. But David couldn't dance. Like, at all. He'd stepped on his ex-wife's feet at their wedding so many times she'd joked about charging him for new shoes. He mentioned this to Rebecca during one of their casual cafeteria chats. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, You know what? I'll teach you. I took ballroom dancing in college. You don't have to do that. I know. But Lily's dance is the same night, and I've been practicing with her. We could do a joint practice session. The girls would probably love it. David hesitated. That's not too weird. The CEO hanging out with an employee and their kids? Probably, Rebecca admitted. But I'm tired of caring what's weird. Are you? Yeah, David said. I really am. The practice session happened that Saturday in Rebecca's building's community room. Sophie and Lily hit it off immediately, discovering they both loved horses and art and the same cartoon show. They giggled through the dancing practice while David and Rebecca tried to teach them steps, and mostly just ended up laughing at themselves. Afterward, they got pizza. Sophie and Lily sat together, coloring on napkins and planning elaborate schemes to convince their parents to let them have more sleepovers. David and Rebecca sat across from them watching. This is nice, Rebecca said quietly. Yeah, David agreed. It really is. I don't know what we're doing here, Rebecca admitted. This whole thing. It's not professional. It's not exactly friendship. It's something else. Does it need to be defined? I guess not. Sophie looked up from her coloring. Daddy, can Rebecca come to our dance? She has her own dance to go to with Lily, remember? But they're at the same school, same night. We could all go together. David and Rebecca exchanged glances. It would raise eyebrows. People would talk. The CEO showing up at a school dance with an employee and their kids would definitely make its way through the company gossip chain. I think that's a great idea, Rebecca said. And she meant it. The dance was perfect. Sophie wore her fancy dress and the shoes Rebecca had secretly bought her, because apparently that's what mysterious benefactors did when they stopped being mysterious. Lily wore a matching dress and the two girls danced together more than with their parents, which was fine by everyone. David actually managed not to step on Sophie's feet. Rebecca caught his eye at one point and mouthed, "Not bad," and he felt ridiculously proud. On Monday, people definitely talked. David heard the whispers, saw